Welcome to the Waiting Warriors podcast. As loved ones of first responders and military personnel, we often face life situations and challenges that many others don't experience. And while each of us and our experiences are unique, together we can learn from one another and become stronger in this journey of life. Now let's step out of mediocrity. It's time to thrive. Hey, Waiting Warriors out there, welcome to another special week on the podcast. We're doing our suicide prevention and awareness series. This week we have Jolynn Lee. Welcome to the show, Jolynn.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
We are thrilled to have you. So Jolynn works in the Reboot Recovery Camp. Oh, dang it. We were just talking about how to print it.
Lejeune. It can go either way.
Either way. I'm Army, so you guys can deal with your controversy of how you're going to pronounce it. But she works there as a site leader. She is married for 30 years to an active duty Marine, a mom of 5 with ages ranging from 29 to 10, and a mother-in-law to active duty Marines. So not only is that introduction incredible, but I am part of a group of the Armed Forces Insurance Military Spouses of the Year. And in that group, I ask people, because there's like such a wealth of knowledge in that group. And I ask people, okay, I'm doing this suicide series. Who should I interview? Do we know any experts? Do we know any people with experience? And Jolynn Lee came so highly recommended, just because of her experience, because of her expertise. And I'm really, really excited to have you on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's not an area that I ever envisioned myself becoming exceptionally knowledgeable about, either with firsthand experience or academic experience, but definitely something that we have leaned into as a family.
Yeah, that's true. Nobody wishes for this expertise, but I'm super grateful that you have it. So can you kind of just get us started, like give us a rundown, tell us your story and your journey as a military spouse and how it's led you to this work.
Sure. So I married into the Marine Corps at 18. That was, I'm loath to tell you how far back that was, but that was way back in 19. I'm so old. 1988.
You're just experienced.
89 time frame.
Yeah.
And it's funny because my first daughter was born when my husband was in the first Gulf War. And we really didn't talk about, there just were no conversations about mental health or combat stress or the ramifications that can occur after combat exposure. I think those conversations started coming into play much later, after 2001, after 9/11, and seeing the after effects that touched first responders and individuals who encountered that tragedy. And then, of course, when our service members started going off into combat, it's funny because at that time, my knowledge was very limited. I had an undergraduate degree. I taught special education. I taught behavior and emotional needs. And so that opened me up to how things that go on with individuals emotionally can really impact their behavior. But it was such a different introduction. I had no idea how that would come into play with regards to combat exposure. And when my husband had a deployment, he was in the Battle of Fallujah, and he came home with a Purple Heart and a Silver Star. I remember on our reintegration brief with the FRO, they basically did this quick slideshow, and this is in no way, shape, or form putting down that program. People just only know what they know. And that's one of the key things that I say is you only know what you know, and you can only convey what you know. So the FRO gave a slideshow, and one of the topics that they covered was, combat exposure, things to look for in your spouse. And it was just a quick slide that talked about like abuse of alcohol, anger issues, sleep issues. But it was so fast that no one, I really don't think anybody in the audience registered that those might be real symptoms that we might encounter in our spouses, that we might experience in our household. I mean, I kind of just was like, check, okay, I heard that, and didn't really register it. What did connect to me, and I think this is why it's so important that we share our stories. What stuck with me from that brief was a spouse who stood up and spoke, and she said, I just want to share with you one of my reintegration experiences. She said, and I never would have envisioned that this would happen, but my husband, he came home and, here we were all dressed up, ready to greet him as we do when we're doing the welcome home thing. She said, and he got off, and I think her experience was, plain. He got off the plane and everybody was there waiting, and he didn't come and greet the family. He kept working, and he just kept working and taking care of his people. And I sat there thinking at that time, naively in my chair, holy cow, I can't believe he did that. That would never happen. My husband would never do that. And I'm telling you, that deployment, when my husband stepped off the bus, he came over, gave me a quick kiss, patted like the kids on the heads, theoretically, so to speak, and then disappeared for the next 2 hours while we stood there waiting. And had I not heard that spouse's story, our reunion would have gone downhill immediately. But because I had heard her story and why her husband did that, the fact that he felt a responsibility to his Marines, he wanted to make sure everybody was making the appropriate connections, that everybody was taken care of, because he wasn't ready. He was not prepared to like mentally lay down that responsibility burden and disconnect and connect with his own family. Had I not heard her story, I would have been very angry and very resentful that here we are at 3 a.m. waiting for our husbands, and mine decides to disappear until 5 a.m. while we're all just sitting here going, where the heck did he go? So that in and of itself spoke volumes to me, that spouses speaking to other spouses is very powerful. So Jeff came home, and I knew that things were not the same. He had a different level of tension. He had a different level of interacting with the family. He had different responses to our household movements, the kids' noise, their quick reactions. There was just things that were indicators that his experience on this deployment had been different from others. We didn't really know what it was. There wasn't, I just didn't know what PTSD was. I didn't know what combat related trauma was. And I don't really think he did either. We had one moment where I kind of cued into, he's actually drinking a little bit more than, and he was never a big drinker, but, grilling out or whatever, he would have a beer. And I kind of cued in on, this is not okay. This is not good. And I said something to him, and he immediately stopped, immediately rectified that. Right. So I'm like, oh, we're good. Everything's good. It was not. We got orders. We transferred to a different unit. And within a very short period of time, our family encountered an additional trauma. We had a child experience a sexual assault. And that kind of, fractured our family, broke down the walls of discussion, and really prompted my husband to reach out and get help. He had an amazing CO who recognized that additional level of trauma in a person's life was going to push my husband over the edge, and immediately insisted that he get counseling, that our family get into help. And that changed everything, because it was at that time, it's so funny. I say to people, it's so amazing to me how we find ourselves unwilling to get help for ourselves, but we will move mountains to find healthy for somebody else. My husband wasn't willing to deal with his own issues, but when he saw his daughter affected, and recognized that the family as a whole had been impacted, he was going to move heaven and earth to make sure we all find healthy. And in the process of doing that, that included him having to find healthy for his personal experiences as well. And let me just tell you, our marriage was not in a good place. I remember right prior to this happening, just kind of looking at my husband and telling him, I love you and I don't want a divorce, but I don't want to live with you if things are going to keep going this way. Because he had a short temper and a quick fuse, was very controlling and OCD. And it was just kind of making us all crazy. So when I say that there is hope, and I do believe that anything can be healed, I mean that, because when we were in that darkest hour, I loved my husband, but I did not like him. I respected the military community and the military service and the military environment, but I was pretty much done. I had taken everything Marine Corps in red, white, and blue out of the house because I was just over it, because I was just burnt. I was tapped out. And after we sought help and we sought healing, and it didn't happen overnight, let me just tell you, it's a lot of work. It is a lot of work, and it was a process. And it took a lot of time, effort, energy, and commitment. And we had to do it in stages. Our first stage was getting the child healthy and getting my husband healthy. And then that moved to getting the marriage healthy, then getting the family healthy. And just as hurt spreads, because hurt people hurt other people. And typically we hurt those that are closest to us, that we love the most, because they're right up close and personal in our world, in our bubble. I am 100% passionate about the fact that healing spreads, and healed people bring healing to other people. And when one person in a family pursues healing with a passion and enthusiasm, that spreads. It just catches, because you're not going to keep that secret to yourself. You're going to want everybody that who's wounded to find that same freedom. So that's kind of how it worked in our family. It was a domino effect. I was adamant and insistent that everybody get help. So my husband would say that I was the spearhead to our family healing movement, for our child, for him, for our marriage, and then for our family as a whole. So we just kind of, I don't know, experienced a metamorphosis, where we went from being this broken, wounded family to becoming these individuals who were extremely passionate about good mental health and speaking freely about those things that people don't like to talk about, which typically is broken mental health. So we left that duty station, got transferred back to Camp Lejeune, and my husband and I were walking through the Naval Hospital for a medical appointment, and I saw a banner that was in the Naval Hospital, and it said Reboot Combat Recovery. And I was like, what is this? And it talked about how the program worked with individuals who had experienced combat trauma. And I turned to my husband and I was like, now, where was this when we were broken? That would have been an amazing thing. That would have been a great program. And in the process of all this, make note, I ended up going back to school to get a graduate degree in counseling because I'm a teacher. And so I needed to learn academically how to help my family. I needed to know what solid mental health practices were, what good counseling was, what I needed to know the ins and outs of it. So that's just how my brain works. So I told my husband, I said, we're going to volunteer with this organization. And he was like, babe, we really don't have time for this. And I said, we don't have time not to do this. So of course, me being the stubborn wife that I am, I'm like, we're doing this. And we ended up getting connected and volunteering with them. And then when the current administrators of the program received orders and transferred away, they asked us if we would carry that torch forward. And we've been involved with the program here ever since. I don't think that there is a one size fits all to addressing trauma in individuals. I do think that it's extremely important for people to continue to look and to not give up until they find what works for them.
Yeah.
And that's where people get discouraged because, something doesn't work or they don't have a quick fix and they want to quit. And dude, there's no quick fix to this. It takes time, effort, and energy. It takes diligence. You take 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. I think the cool thing about Reboot is you do it in company with other individuals who have a similar experience and a similar story. Mm-hmm. So you're not doing it alone. It's healing in community with others who get it. And typically it's veteran led. And so that provides an element of depth that may otherwise be missing.
Yeah.
That's just my story.
Well, I mean, it's not awesome that you went with, but that you guys have been able to come so far and now you're helping so many others.
And it's not awesome that we went through it, but I will tell you, having gone through the experiences that we went through, every member of our family has had the opportunity to speak hope into other individuals who have experienced trauma in some form or fashion. My husband spent some time at the Naval Academy as an instructor, and I'm telling you, he could identify woundedness, particularly in young women at the Naval Academy, because of our family experience. Yeah. And there was I guess he might have just radiated a sensitivity and compassion because they would confide in him and he would be able to direct them to get help. Each of our kids have had the opportunity to speak into someone else, encouragement to get help, to find healing, to step out, to use your voice. Mm-hmm. And so while I wish as a family we had never experienced the things that we had experienced, if it provides us with the opportunity to encourage others to step out of their darkness, then it's worth it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So as you guys have been so active in Reboot Recovery with helping handle all these traumas, and combat trauma in particular is kind of what the military typically deals with. What is
or doesn't?
Yeah, or what is something that you wish you had known earlier about combat trauma? Like, is there anything that just you think every single military spouse, it should just be common knowledge?
Oh my goodness. I think that it should be common knowledge that it looks different in every person. There's no one size fits all as to what it's going to look like in an individual, in your marriage, or in your family. I think it should be common knowledge to understand trauma doesn't happen in a bubble. So
what do you mean by that?
What affects that individual? When that individual goes off to combat and they come home, when they've been impacted, while they may think it's just them that's been touched, it touches everybody because they're going to interact differently with their spouse. They're going to interact differently with their children. They're going to respond differently. One of the things that my husband struggled with when we had our initial late in life baby, the 12-year-old, he really struggled with him crying. He did not like the sound of his crying. And we ended up being interviewed by the Today Show online, speaking about parenting with PTSD. And that brief article that was published online, I had so many people reach out because we talked about how PTSD impacted our family life and parenting. Mm-hmm. And so many people that were close to me were like, oh my gosh, nobody's ever talked about that before. I've never told anybody how my husband couldn't stand to hear our baby cry, how he couldn't stand to hear the kids running through the house screaming, how how my spouse nearly, knee-jerk reacted when our child startled them when they were in the recliner and they came up swinging.
Yeah.
So I just wish that there was more of an awareness, both for the individual that's impacted and for the family as a whole, that it doesn't happen in a bubble. And what affects one affects all. And it is super beneficial for the whole family the whole family to get help. Because a lot of times you see the parent-child relationship kind of deteriorate and separate because the child doesn't understand what's going on with the parent.
Yeah.
And the parent doesn't have the ability to convey that to the child, or they're too embarrassed to convey that to the child. And so a separation occurs, and it doesn't have to be that way. There's a better way.
Yeah.
Communication is the key, but it's communicating about a topic that no one really wants to talk about.
Yeah. But we don't fix anything unless we talk about it. It's like this vicious, terrible cycle that until somebody starts talking, nothing's going to get better.
Correct. That's absolutely true. And I do think the mindset is changing within the military in terms of it being so taboo to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not 100%.
Yeah.
But I do feel like it is better now than it used to be.
Yeah. And I
just want it to continue.
Yeah. And I will say to that point, like, I've been talking to so many spouses this last few weeks about suicide because of the series and talking about why I wanted to do it and the awesome interviews that have happened and are coming. And it's like, everybody has said that, right? Like, well, the military is getting better, but it's not as good as it should be. And my gut reaction every time has been like, it's not just the DOD's job, you know, it's not just the Pentagon's job or your CO's job or your sergeant's job or whoever is above you. It is not just their job to make the military community's attitude towards this better. I feel like we as spouses have a huge responsibility to make it better. And it gets better by us bringing it up, by us talking about it before they go, by us talking about it before or when they come back, by us listening to podcasts and reading articles and then sharing them with our communities and our neighbors and our friends when we do listen to this. Like, Jolynn, I mean, obviously, I'm going to share this episode because that's my job, but like, something that you have said has really touched me, and I've had the thought of sharing it with a friend, and I'm going to send it to that specific friend, even though this is kind of a weird thing and not necessary, you know, like it's not something I've talked about with this friend before, but I feel like it's so important for it to just not be taboo in our community. And it's not going to be that way until we
I agree.
Talk about
I think
it.
the only
like
way
we can't just wait for
we take away this stigma is you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable and speaking into that darkness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not comfortable for us to air our dirty laundry. I had air quotes going with that, even though you can't see me. However, when we as a community start telling our story, that gives other people the courage to share theirs. And I really do feel like the more you share your story, the less power it has over you.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Put that on every like suicide prevention awareness poster there is. Like,
right.
We just have to talk about it. It's not
because it doesn't
going
mean
to just go away.
When you have those moments of darkness, it doesn't mean that you have to be broken forever. It just means you're having a broken moment. And when we share our broken moments, like, it gets better. It does get better. And it helps others realize that they're not broken alone, that they can have a broken moment and together we can move forward. There's just power in that community.
Yeah, there is. And in just understanding, like, because something I was thinking about before the interview, like, I was reading some stuff. Oh, shoot, I should look who it actually was, or my husband, who is all, you have to cite everything, and research isn't research unless you say who it's from. The national, you master degree people are all the same that way. It was the National Council of Behavior Health for the United States did a study, and I think the stats I was looking at was from 2019, so the one that they just recently published, and they were saying that 70% of adults have experienced at least one traumatic event in their life.
Yes, that is
And
accurate.
because of this, we as a society need to treat PTSD, is the one they were particularly talking about, seriously, and we need to understand it. We need to understand the signs. We need to understand the coping mechanisms so that we as a society can be as healthy as we can be.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved that they are bringing attention to that. But then I realized the people who are listening to this podcast are military, firefighters, law enforcement, and then other first responders, loved ones, right?
Right.
That group of people, hands down, easily experience way more than just one trauma
Oh,
in
that's
their life.
correct. They have layers of trauma.
Layers.
Mm-hmm.
Like layers. And it's not 70% of our community. It is probably 99.99999% of our community, because of what their job is to do. They are exposed to trauma.
And here's the thing. They treat as a community, well, I mean, as a society, we will treat our mental health with less care and respect than we would treat our vehicle, our appliance, or a rescue pet. I said this to somebody the other day. I said, as a society, we have so much compassion and care for rescue animals. We understand that they're being rescued for a reason, because they've either been abandoned, they've been abused, they've come out of a really awful experience, and we will love on them. We will rehabilitate them. We will, provide situational success for them, meaning we put them in environments where they can thrive. But we do not have that same level of compassion and care for broken people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's something that comes from a lack of awareness, a lack of understanding, and a lack of education as to what broken mental health means. And it doesn't mean that you're making excuses for people or you're justifying bad behavior. It means that you understand the origin of that behavior, and you're going to work with that person so that they can get to what is the root of their issue. And then we can pull up the bad root and plant a better harvest. Now I'm going into farm metaphors, but anyway, I hope you understand what I'm saying, because like, you won't drive when the warning light comes on your car, you take it in and you get it serviced. When something goes out on your stove or your fridge, you call a repairman. But we will keep operating as people when the warning lights are going off in our life and things are broken within us. We just keep plowing ahead and pushing it aside, going, oh no, I can push through. I can keep doing it. I can keep doing it till eventually it gives out. We're not designed to do that.
Yeah. And I love all those different metaphors that you gave, because I feel like now, depending on what your loved one is into, like, hey, she just gave you a gardening metaphor, which my husband could totally use on me because I'm into that. If your husband's into cars, like, maybe that's the way you need to speak to them, or whatever they are into. Like, you would care for your, I'm trying to think of another one, but I'm not as clever as you. But it's like, if they're into football, it's like, if your favorite player was hurt, you would want them to get healed so quickly. You wouldn't want them to be
you would put them through the rehabilitation process, and then you would give them time to get their feet back under them so that they could come back and take the field when they were fully operational and fully functional. You would set them up for an avenue for success. But we don't do that with individuals. There's a million different directions that you can explain it, but it all comes back to the fact that we've got to be willing to admit that we have a problem, and we have to be willing to step out and seek help. And just because, let me just tell you, I told you I went back and got my graduate degree in counseling. That is because we went through several counselors that I literally said they're crackpots and wackadoodles. Like, there was no other way to phrase it other than, you're a crackpot, you're a wackadoodle, and I'm not bringing my family to you because I might not be academically trained, but I can recognize stupid when I see stupid. And so I needed to know what good mental health was, because these people didn't know how to help us get there. And so just because maybe the first step you take isn't successful, that doesn't mean that you stop moving forward. You try again and you try again and you try again. And I think one of the things we tell people with Reboot, okay, if you come to Reboot and it's not for you, then at least join arms with us until we find something that does work for you.
Yeah. And okay, so can you tell us real fast, because we only got a few minutes left, of what is Reboot Recovery?
Reboot Combat Recovery, and then they have Reboot for First Responders, is a 12-week program. It does not take the place of formal counseling, but it is a 12-week program that is going to provide those individuals who come with practical application tools to deal with the traumatic events that they've been exposed to. Every
Okay.
week, you will go and you will meet and you will engage with your fellow participants, and you will learn something that week
Mm-hmm.
that you can directly apply to your life that's going to bring about change.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get out of the program what you put into it. We've had people who have come through multiple times because, again, trauma can happen in layers. And so
Mm-hmm.
healing happens kind of like peeling back the layers of an onion, where you're like, okay, well, this area is good now, but this area needs addressed. That's not failure. That's pursuit of healthy.
Yeah.
Um, I wish that folks knew that mental health and suicide, it can sneak up on you. I recently wrote a blog post where I called it silent drowning, and
Mm-hmm.
I referenced what happened to a family member who was close to us. And here I am with a graduate degree in counseling, and here we are, site leads for Reboot here at Camp Lejeune, and we had a family member that was really close to us who slipped over the edge and very nearly killed himself. He sat in his truck with a gun in his hand and said to my husband just happened to get there in time. He said to my husband, I don't want to die, but I can't keep living like this.
Mm-hmm.
And then he went to pull the trigger, and my husband was able to physically intervene and prevent that from happening. But the point is, this is somebody that was super close to us, and we have direct interaction with them on a regular basis. We have academic knowledge and personal experience, and that still slipped past our awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And I equated that experience to our granddaughter. We were all swimming in the swimming pool, and we have a large family. We have 7 grandchildren, and her parents were in the pool. We were in the pool, and one of the grandchildren got into trouble swimming. And ironically enough, the 12-year-old is the one that recognized it and jumped in and pulled her up. We were right there, but we nearly missed it.
Oh.
See, that happens. That
Yeah.
happens. And when it does, I want to tell people it's not your fault. It's not
Mm-hmm.
your fault if you miss it, because we are all just human. And so often people carry that survivor guilt.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we are all truly just doing the best that we can, but the best that we can do is just educate ourselves and increase awareness, bring a voice to these stories. Talk
Mm.
about it, talk about it, talk about it.
Yeah. And if you guys haven't gotten the hint, you should talk about it and then talk about it more.
Right?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Last
Absolutely.
question. What has been your key to thriving that you want to share with your fellow waiting warriors?
Oh, okay. So don't laugh at me. I have a little
Mm-mm.
acronym. Thrive, right? THRIVE.
Uh-huh.
Train habits to reduce stress, increase value, and engage with excellence. If you
Guys.
want to thrive in your environment, and we all know that our environments change on the regular with military life, and you don't always get to pick them. I say that
Mm-hmm.
sarcastically because let's be real, we never get to pick them.
Yeah.
You have to cultivate the practice of training habits in your life and within your family and within your unit that are going to reduce stress, both personally and as a family unit. You're going to increase value within your life, within your family unit, within your community, so that you can engage and operate in your area successfully. That doesn't happen by accident. I'm sorry, the phone's ringing in the background. That happens with intentionality and purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be
That is
my recommendation.
that is the coolest answer to that question to date. Out of
Oh, thanks.
73 episodes, that is my favorite. And I want to make like a cool, I don't know. That is awesome. That is
Absolutely.
so awesome. Well,
Well,
thank
thank
you so
you.
much for coming on the show. Jolynn, if anybody has some questions, if they want to connect with you, thank you for being on the show. What's the best way for them to do that?
Absolutely. They can email me at contact@jolynnlee.com, JOLYNNLEE.com. They can Google Starfish Talks. That's my blog page. And
Cool.
there's an email there that they can reach out, or they can find me on Facebook. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I typically give out my phone number to everybody because, with Reboot, we're open to text messages and phone calls as well. So I don't know if I should share my phone number here or not. That's up to you.
No,
But
yeah, not in here. We'll let people reach out and then you
okay,
can give it to them from there. But thank you again so much. Guys, please keep talking about this. Please share
yes,
the episodes with your friends. Reach out to Jolynn if you have questions.
absolutely,
If you want to learn more, just let's keep this conversation going. Let's keep our community getting healthier and
absolutely.
healthier. And Jolynn, seriously, from the bottom of my
Well,
heart,
thank
thank
you.
you so much. Thank you. Thank you. And
I
all you
appreciate
waiting
it.
warriors out there, remember, just because it's hard doesn't mean it has to be miserable. Have a great week, guys. Hey, fellow waiting warriors. Since I know you are loving this podcast and being able to connect and learn from others, I need you to go and write a review for the podcast. Even just a rating with the stars really helps people find this podcast. And the more people listening means the more people thriving, which is truly my ultimate goal for all of you. It's super simple, will just take a minute, but it will make a world of difference.